from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Nearly 600 workers at various meatpacking plants across Nebraska tested positive for the coronavirus in April, with at least one death. That's according to the latest numbers from the CDC. But they don't tell the full story. This is what it normally looks like inside a Tyson meatpacking plant. This video was shot before the pandemic and handed out by the company. It shows an environment where health officials say a virus can spread quickly, with workers in close proximity and an assembly line that never stops moving.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 13th edition of a special weekly series on Consider This, COVID-19. Today's focus, the meatpacking industry. Joining us to talk more about it is Shelley Sweethelm. Shelley is the Executive Director of Emergency Management and Biopreparedness at Nebraska Medicine. She also serves as one of the executive directors of the Global Center for Health Security. Thank you so much for being here, Shelley, and welcome.
Thank you.
I want to start, how many meatpacking plants do we have in Nebraska?
Well, what I can tell you is that we've visited 14 now, so I don't really know the total number. There are many different sizes, and some are just production facilities, and others are full, plants. So we visited 14 at this time.
Okay, and how many employees are in those plants?
Yeah, so some of the plants are smaller, so a few hundred, and then other plants are much larger scale at probably 2,000 to 4,000. So it just depends on the plant and then their production capacity.
Okay. Tell us about these workers and kind of a typical day for them.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of hard for me to describe, but I can tell you what I observed during the tours that we were able to do. So a lot of individuals working closely. A lot of things had been put in place to be able to separate them. At the time that we really started the plant work, they were in progress, so to speak, some of the barriers being put in place. It's a lot of repetitive work, a lot of people very close, elbow to elbow, so to speak, and that's pretty much what we saw.
Okay, and enter COVID-19, right?
Correct.
And we have somewhat of a breeding ground for this virus, right?
Right. Anytime you have a dense environment, so whether that is perhaps a shelter or a jail or anywhere where people are very closely working side by side or living side by side, you're going to have the opportunity for transmission.
Okay. Greatest concerns, Shelley, when we think about what you're describing, especially the viewers at home wondering, okay, so why or how should we be concerned about this at this point?
Yeah, we should be concerned because as we know about this virus, people can actually have the virus and have no symptoms. So shedding the virus is possible without being symptomatic. We know that it's spread through droplets, so we need to make sure that we're doing really thorough cleaning and really trying to reduce transmission of droplet spread through potentially wearing masks and really putting some barriers in place to try to mitigate spread.
Okay, and people thinking about the food, obviously.
Correct.
I mean, this is a big source for folks. So talk about any cause for concern there.
Yeah, at this time, no evidence to be concerned about our food supply as far as COVID and transmission. So there's been no cases of spread in that direction. So it's spread really through human to human contact and through droplets that might be on surfaces, and then we touch those and touch our mucous membranes, our eyes, our mouth, our nose, things like that, where it could be spread in that way through contact.
Okay. How or maybe when did UNMC and Nebraska Medicine become involved in this?
It seems like it's been a marathon, but I know it was only like March. So we've been running since that time. So I think our first plant visit was towards the end of March.
Okay, and there's a global center. We're going to put up some video for our viewers Tell us about, this is another role that you serve.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Global Center for Health Security at UNMC is a umbrella, so to speak, for all of our varied biopreparedness grant work, education and training. We've got some contracts with the Department of Defense and others with the federal government. We've got our quarantine unit, our biocontainment unit, and lots of other strategies. Our basic science group with some of the drug supply, pipeline work, as well as just many other aspects. And so the Global Center is really the umbrella for all of that work to allow us to sort of coordinate and communicate and push out various opportunities and strategies.
Wow. Okay, so this might be a good time in the interview to ask about your background. Pretty extensive, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
You're certainly the right person for this from what I've been able to see. But talk a little bit about your background and how you wound up here.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I have always been sort of a junkie for exciting things and learning new things. So I've been a nurse for many years, and started out my career in the ER, did some flight nursing, and then infection prevention, operating room, ER, and a few of those things. So I'm actually a farm girl too. Grew up on a farm, and I've actually have cattle now. So I've spent a lot of time in this industry. Really was interesting to me to better understand what happens in meatpacking plants. And I think just our general background in the Global Center for Infection Prevention and Control lended itself nicely to us raising our hand and offering our state some support in this regard.
Wow, so as you're talking, I'm thinking when you enter any environment, you must see things differently than the rest of us, including a meatpacking plant. Talk about that from your perspective.
Yeah, it is interesting because we've taken on not only meatpacking, but also spent time in shelters and correctional facilities, and have done a lot of work in long-term care in Nebraska. So it is different for us because we use a framework for risk mitigation, and so there's nothing more powerful than physically seeing the layout of an environment, how workers move, and the direction and the flow, the air handling. There's just lots of different components of it that I think you would miss out on just doing a Zoom call.
Wow, okay, so let's talk about the meat packing plant. You're called in, you're going to your very first facility. What is step number one?
Yeah, so we try to really work hard to collaborate with the local public health, because many times they've got a relationship already. So in many cases the local public health folks have come with us, and in some cases not so much. So we're a non-regulatory group, which makes it much easier for us to get in the door, because nothing we see or observe is going to be shared except in aggregate, for the betterment and the learning and the feedback directly to the plant leadership. So we take a lot of pride in that. And I think that, we're just boots on the ground, here to help, technical assistance. So we spend a lot of time initially just getting to know the leaders, understanding the demographics of the facility. So when I say that, I mean the diversity of the various cultures of the employee workforce. How many folks have they had with COVID? What is their relationship with public health? How are they communicating with their workforce? How many supervisors to plant workers? And just some of those sorts of things. And some of that's in our checklist that we just sort of walk through and get to know them. And then next we do the tour of the plant.
How were you received overall? I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and then your group goes in, and folks are very aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
Did you feel like the doors were really open to you and people were willing?
Yeah, for the most part, we felt very embraced by plants, and actually they were the ones who were able to reach out to us. Our governor actually facilitated a call every Friday with leaders, and in that call we were able to share aggregate data and kind of close the loop back with things that we saw that were gaps and needed some further enhancement. And I think, it's fair to say we had a couple that were a little reluctant, But we did a phone call with those, and I think the phone call helped allay anxiety a bit, and some of those then we were able to then meet and get into the plant to sit down with them.
Okay, question, when you're going into these plants, was there anything that you maybe expected to see but went in and it was kind of a nice surprise? It was a positive and you're thinking, okay, at least we don't have to address that. Talk about the positives that you saw on these tours.
Yeah, I think in all fairness, for the ones that we went into early on, as we were just beginning and starting to really form our recommendations, some of the interventions weren't yet in place. So putting the barriers between workers on the line, universal masking, some of those things that are now pretty hardwired were not in place at that time. So I would just say it's been an evolution and a progression, both in our recommendations as well as then the hardwiring of these things in the varied plants.
When you're thinking about the red flags that I'm sure you observed and understanding what the consequence can be, I would imagine it just took something for you to just be able to say, okay, we're here to observe, we're here to kind of get the data. Was there anything that was especially jolting to you in learning that maybe you weren't expecting?
Yeah, you know, I think about, as I reflect now back on our visits and back on some of the additional work that we've done, we have now done through our College of Public Health a worker survey to understand their understanding of some of the communication and education. And I think some of that gave me pause, because as I was doing the plant tours and our team was there, we talked a lot about, you know, seeing evidence of the multi-language signs on the walls as they were trying to communicate about hand washing, about how to wear your mask, about the symptoms of COVID. But then I think, you know, understanding what the gap is there in validating that understanding. So we've continued to do work with that on our calls with the governor and leaders to really feedback that data from that survey that the College of Public Health did, to really help them understand that it's great to put a poster on the wall, but we have to do more. And this is not a virus that is just in plants. You know, it impacts us in the work environments that we all work in, but it also is in the community. So what we do in both of those locations matters. So really helping those folks understand, you know, sort of all of this data and information for not only at the plant, but at home or on the way home, or in their community.
That's a really good point to bring up. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, trying to put myself in the worker's shoes. I mean, this would be overwhelming to most people. And I would imagine even for an expert like yourself, there have to have been moments, and maybe there will be moments, where knowing what you know, having experienced what you've experienced, that you can become overwhelmed yourself. True?
I think when you put long-term care shelters, jails, and meatpacking plants together, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So at what point, Shelley, then, through your experiences, have you seen and heard enough to be able to say, okay, now we can take a few steps back, you know, remain as objective as possible, have the perspective needed to be able to do this? And you mentioned 14 plants, all different in some ways, all similar in some ways. So at what point are you able to pretty confidently, knowing what's at hand here or at stake, take those steps back and say, time to start putting this stuff down now?
I think we're there.
Okay.
Honestly, we've had no additional reach outs. We do have continuing requests and emails for technical assistance, or even some of the plant leaders are like, tell us more about what else can I be doing, or what do you think about this? Would this make a difference? And I think now we're working on lots of other things related to the State Health Department has done a nice job of creating an opportunity for us to put not only healthcare workers and others in isolation and quarantine facility areas, so some hotels and things like that. We've been able to accommodate some of these folks from plants if they don't want to go home and they've had an exposure, or perhaps they've got COVID and they don't want to go home. They can have a place that's safe to stay during their time, to work through the 14 days or their illness, so they don't have to be worried about infecting their families and things like that. So that's been a really great program too. So I think hopefully the workers are seeing, that we're listening. We want to get this data back to them about the survey. We're working with community groups now to better understand the data. And then we've closed the loop back with the plant leaders on our weekly call to say, it's great that we're doing X, Y, Z and we're posting these things, but their level of understanding is not as significant as it should be. So maybe this would be an area for you to reinforce.
Okay, and this might be a good time in the conversation to talk about the collaborative efforts in this pandemic, in this particular situation. The coordination just has to be unbelievable to know, again, what you are trying to accomplish. And it's not just you, Shelley, here.
Right.
This is you, Shelley, working
teams.
with your team, working with teams and other organizations.
Yes.
Who's involved in this, and really kind of give us an idea of what's going on behind the scenes with all these moving parts, all these organizations.
You're absolutely right. This is a very significant teamwork effort. So not only is it public health, it is at the local jurisdiction level where the plant resides. It's the state public health department. It's the community leaders. It's the different cultural leaders in the communities. It's the global center. It's business and industry in some of these leaders. It's healthcare facilities. And now you think about public health lab, Test Nebraska. It's massive. And then the accommodation for people if we need to place them safely somewhere for a period of time. So we're on a roll now, I feel like. And I feel like the plants are really getting clarity, and we're doing universal masking. So our case numbers are down in those facilities. So we're hoping that now hardwiring and staying the course and maintaining our vigilance is what I think is really the priority.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that I am hearing over and over again in all of this, is that need for people to come together and work well together, that collaborative. So if we try to find any kind of positive in all of this, it could be that it's really forced really good organizations to come together and do really great things.
I agree.
Right, and one of the examples of that is this playbook. We're going to put up a graphic for our viewers so they can see the cover of it.
Sure.
Nothing to be taken lightly. This is a result of all that you've been working on, and like you said, it seems like forever ago, March, but all that you've been working on, kind of a compilation. So when we look at this cover, Shelley, what's coming to mind?
What comes to mind is that we use a risk mitigation framework from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. So it doesn't matter to us whether we're working in a long-term care facility or a shelter or meatpacking facility. We use that framework to really apply all of the different interventions that we suggest. So the framework goes from the most effective controls to the least effective. So the most effective is elimination, and then secondly, a substitution. Until we get a vaccine, we can't do either of those. So then the third most effective is engineering controls. So that's physically putting a barrier between the worker and the virus. So in meatpacking plants, that might be adding that physical barrier at the different stations you saw in the video. So that would be one. Looking at airflow and air handling. Can we increase fresh air intake and reduce recirculated air? So that's an engineering control. Then the next most effective control is administrative controls, and that's really where a lot of our interventions lie. So that might be cleaning protocols, and how often are we hitting the high-touch surfaces? How are we screening our workers when they come to work every day? Are we checking temperatures and symptoms? Are we compliant with our physical distancing? And do we put visual cues on the floor? And how have we set up our break rooms, remove chairs to try to kind of force the issue of people not sitting side by side. And then finally, personal protective equipment, which most people think is the be-all, end-all, but it's actually the least effective, and that's because we're all human. And it might fail, and we probably may wear it wrong. So the education and communication about all that plays a big part. So that's sort of the controls and the framework that we use.
Wow, and you're a lead author. Tell us about the people behind this piece of work. There are a few lead authors, and then you had some contributors.
Yes.
That had to have been a task in and of itself, to pull together the right people to take what you experienced and communicate it in a way that was understandable, that people could accept, and then be able to move forward and try to implement and enforce. So tell us about that team behind that book.
So many of the team members are from the Global Center for Health Security, so infectious disease, industrial hygiene, really knowledgeable, doctorate prepared College of Public Health individuals. We've got the ag science group who came in and helped us with really the holistic view, did the worker survey and things like that. So that's predominantly the group that's been doing all the visits. Jocelyn Herstein has done an amazing job, kind of as my counterpart. We've been a lot of miles across the state.
Yeah, I would imagine that, Shelley, you have maybe known of some of these people, known them in a certain way, but until you come together to work on a project of this magnitude, I would imagine you're getting to know them, right? A little bit differently. Any surprises in there? Did anybody kind of rise to the top where you're thinking, okay, we've accomplished this, and now, I mean, I'm just thinking of these people who are coming together in the midst of this pandemic. They're going to be together for a long time down the road because of what has been accomplished with this. It's setting the stage for some prevention and lots of other things down the road. Thoughts about that?
I really hope that some of the things that we've learned, as you just noted, we hold on to and don't let go of when the pandemic is over. So the Global Center has had the opportunity to really serve as a convener. So in collaboration with the State Health Department, we host a briefing every day at 9 o'clock where we report out on all different facets of the response happening in the state. We're starting to think about recovery, opening up long-term care and things like that. And how do we begin to get our after-action report done to say, what did we learn? We're still in the midst of response, so don't get me wrong. What do we need to do better? And then hopefully being more prepared if we go into a second wave. But I would agree with you. I think silos and barriers have been broken down. I think there's never been a more critical time for public health, healthcare, emergency management, EMS to all work together for the betterment of our state and communities.
Yeah, I would imagine viewers, I feel like I'm on the edge of my seat here because I feel like this is really something so wonderful that has come from this. And you said yourself, I hope we hold on to it. The big question is how do we do that? So as you are kind of coming out of this, and obviously we all hope that is well, what do you do, Shelley, in terms of your role to make sure that we hold on? Because you're right, we're humans and we tend to go off to the next thing. Right. So what are your thoughts in terms of how do we hold on to this so that we can maximize this not only for our state, but big picture?
So we have what's called coalitions in our state and actually across the United States. So there's been effort in the last 3 to 4 years from a federal perspective to really force the issue of more collaboration. So I feel strongly as a member of the coalition that these end user groups that I just spoke of, public health, healthcare, EMS, emergency management, we can do so much better in emergency preparedness together than ever separate. So this infectious disease outbreak has really taught us that. Okay. And it isn't just infectious disease. We need to be ready for a chemical incident, a radiation incident, a mass casualty incident, whatever that might be. I do feel like life is about relationships, and this event has gone a long way in forging those. Okay,
and one of the questions I want to make sure that I ask, whether it's meatpacking plants or anything else in terms of this pandemic, guidelines have been stated, books have been published. The enforcement piece is top of mind for people. So it's one thing to have this great plan, but how are you hoping that this is enforced, especially in the 14 plants that you visited?
Yep. So you put tools in the hands of leaders. And then I think you look for output metrics to understand, do we have a new outbreak? Do we have, what's our testing numbers? Because you honestly don't know what you have until you test. How quickly can we contact trace and figure out who people were in those close areas? So I think we'll be looking for some outputs like that, and just stay close to this group of leaders. And then I think also we just need to continue to analyze and assess the workers and understand, how can we make things better for the workers, as a result of this pandemic too.
Okay. Lessons to be learned in everything that we do. From where you're sitting right now, having experienced everything that you have and gone through in your life, greatest lesson learned in this pandemic?
I think it's always about relationships and communication. Communication can always be better. I think as I reflect also, we did a lot of preparedness planning, but did we do enough to really stockpile adequately the amount of personal protective equipment we would need? Do we have enough individuals who are trained in infection prevention and control to really, I think, way more are really knowledgeable now, but how do we hold on to that? And I just think, overall, I think we all need to get ready for if there's a second wave, or if influenza seems to kind of be coupled on this. And I think we'll have to be very careful as we reopen to really manage the sweet spot of other things that we're helping and managing in healthcare, which people don't quit having heart attacks and trauma and strokes at the same point in time that we continue to see people, close to each other, not masked, things like that. So it's just going to be this constant balance going forward.
30 seconds. If we could do one thing to make a difference in this pandemic, what would each of us do?
Wear a mask when you're within 6 feet of each other, and physically distance, and be compliant. Because if everybody did that, we would reduce transmission, and we would all be able to have the economy and impacts that we need to do to make sure that we keep jobs and all the other important things while managing this outbreak.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple websites that we want to put up for our viewers who want more information. Global Center for Health Security, that is unmc.edu/health security. And the next one, COVID-19 playbook for meat processing facilities, to learn more about what Shelley talked about. And that's unmc.edu/health security/COVID-19/playbooks. Shelley, thank you so much for being here and sharing your time and expertise. We wish you the very best moving forward.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.